Good morning on this brisk but sunny Sunday winter morning, and welcome to this online worship service presented by the Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden and the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society. Whether you're a member or friend of our two congregations or a visitor just visiting with us for the first time, we welcome you today as we continue our reflections on the spiritual theme of imagination this morning. Together with Unitarian Universalists across the globe, we begin our service today by lighting our flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition, with these words written by Molly Brewer, which seem particularly appropriate following the events of this past week. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now. That there's no reason to be angry. That you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell it to you. But now our chalice is lit. And so all I ask in this moment is that we remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love.
Hi, beloveds. It's been quite a week. The elation many of us felt Wednesday morning learning the outcome of the United States Senate races in Georgia was tempered quickly and profoundly by the armed insurrection and attack on the U.S. Capitol building at the urging of the President, Donald Trump. I was reminded this week, as I told the crowd at a vigil, of what Bishop John Selders of Moral Monday, Connecticut says. I do not believe in law and order. I believe in grace and justice. And because of this, I put my faith, my trust in the possibility of hope and moving forward to a better day. Hope is not just mindless optimism and powerless wishful thinking. It is something that we hold on to that gets us to the next step, to the better day. Admiral James Stockdale said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be." Hope is a cornerstone of Unitarian Universalism, but the brutal reality we currently face is that nearly half of those who voted in last November's election are hateful, violent bigots who are disassociated from reality, or they have no problem with those who are. Either way, it is the same. We cannot afford to chant the refrain that this is not who we are when we see brainwashed white men in MAGA hats carrying guns and bombs and nooses into the Capitol, because unfortunately this is exactly who we are as Americans, nearly half of us. This reminds me of what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said about the difference between stupidity and malice, and that stupidity, ignorance, is more dangerous than malice, hate, and evil He said, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil. It can be exposed and, if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion, and that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protest nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's judgment simply need not be believed. In such moments, the stupid person even becomes critical, and when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all this, the stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied, and being easily irritated becomes dangerous by going on the attack. For that reason, greater caution is called for when dealing with a stupid person than with a malicious one. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reason, for it is senseless and dangerous." Because ignorance is such a formidable foe, I put my faith, my trust in our Unitarian Universalist living tradition and its sources of wisdom, especially humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit, like Trumpism and QAnon. The Unitarian Universalist Association released a statement this week, and I offer the briefest of summaries of that to you. The Unitarian Universalist Association joins leaders across the country in calling for the immediate removal of Donald Trump as United States President. President Trump and other national leaders, including members of Congress, must be held accountable for inciting insurrectionist violence by spreading lies and false claims of election fraud and attempting to usurp the will of the American people. We call on every member of Congress to act on their sworn constitutional allegiance and tell the American people the truth, that the presidential election represented a free and fair election. We call on our government to take this attack on our democracy seriously. White supremacist violence is the greatest threat to public safety and our democracy. We must use this moment as an opportunity for profound reflection and awakening, not just in a momentary outcry, but as a basis for significant and lasting change. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition is rooted in the values of human dignity, justice, compassion, and democratic principles. We will remain vigilant in our commitment to protecting our democracy and the integrity of its principles and the rights of all its people. My dear ones, we saw this week in the insurrection at the Capitol a true, living, vivid illustration of white supremacy culture. We thought if Black Lives Matter had done such a protest, they would have been met with a force which was not to be reckoned with. The show of force would have been absolute and from the beginning. And yet mostly white men, armed and dangerous, were allowed inside the Capitol. If we ever needed an example of the racism that still controls our thinking and the white supremacy culture upon which our entire society runs, there it was, live on video. I hope that you will not lose courage or faith or give up on democracy, our country, or our neighbors who may be led astray. Help and hope are on the way with a new administration in Washington, but there's still much work to do. I look forward to joining you in that work as winter becomes spring, sickness becomes health, and a divided country reckons with our history and begins to create genuine beloved community. I love you, and as I've said from the beginning, we will get through this the only way we can, together.
In his eulogy for American humorist Marshall Pinckney Wilder, who coincidentally died 106 years ago today, his friend, the philosopher and writer Elbert Hubbard, in praise of Wilder's optimism in the face of adversity, coined the proverbial phrase, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade." This adage has been variously quoted by many others since then. In 1940, the following verse was published in the Rotarian, author unknown. Life handed him a lemon, as life sometimes will do. His friends looked on in pity, assuming he was through. They came upon him later, reclining in the shade, in calm contentment drinking a glass of lemonade. The idea of turning lemons into lemonade, of taking the sourness one is often dealt and making something refreshing out of it, has a certain appeal. Sandy has often wondered who it was that first saw a lobster and said, "Wow, that looks like it would be real tasty." And one might also be curious as to how it was we first figured out that something as sour as a lemon might likewise be of culinary value. The word lemon has numerous connotations, many of them less than savory. For example, we have lemon laws protecting consumers from products that have chronic defects. In the early days of the last century, a lemon was something seen to be worthless, and it's also used as a metaphor for something that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. In the 1962 song made famous by Peter, Paul, and Mary, Will Holt laments, "One day she left without a word. She took away the sun, and in the dark she left behind. I knew what she had done. She'd left me for another. It's a common tale but true. A sadder man but wiser now. I sing these words to you. Lemon tree very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat." Lemonade is actually pretty simple. Lemons, sugar, water, and a few ice cubes to add a refreshing chill. For a different twist, some folks get imaginative and throw a splash of cranberry juice or a touch of lime. There's even adult versions of the beverage available, but it's a bit early in the morning for that. We've had no shortage of lemons presented to us over the last several months. The COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed our lives in ways we never could have imagined. And speaking of beyond imagination, when I originally started writing this a few days ago, none of us could have expected the events that Reverend Tony just spoke of, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. It was the second week of March, rapidly approaching a year ago now, that it became apparent we would have to stop holding our worship services in person in the near future. Several of our sister congregations had already canceled in-person meetings. That Friday, our two boards held emergency meetings, and it was decided that we would move to online services immediately. As luck would have it, I was the service leader that week, and the title appropriately was Embracing Uncertainty. If you'll pardon the mixing of metaphors, it was Alan Saunders who was first quoted in 1957 as having said, "Life is what happens when we're making other plans. And often it is when, to paraphrase Robert Burns, the best laid plans of mice and men go awry, that we're forced to use our imaginations to create something new."
Dr. Henry Kissinger is not known for his comedic talent. However, comedian Billy Crystal relates the first time he met Dr. Kissinger was when he found that they were sitting side by side on a commercial airplane. Feeling intimidated by Dr. Kissinger, Crystal tried to figure out how to say hello. Finally, he just said, "Hello, Dr. Kissinger. My name is Billy Crystal." And without skipping a beat, Kissinger said, "And you look marvelous." Years later, he was with Dr. K in the personal box of the New York Yankee owner George Steinbrenner, along with famed ball player Joe DiMaggio. The Yankees were playing terribly. As the seventh inning began, Kissinger turned to Joe and said, "Time to suit up, Joe." That last spring, our daughter, Sarah, was struggling with a decision about where her children, our grandchildren, should go to school. After much discussion, I was told, "Time to suit up, Pop," and became a teacher. Unlike Joe DiMaggio, I did not have a career as a teacher. But as a result of COVID, I have been with 2 of our grandchildren 3 days a week, along with my excellent co-teacher, Christine. It has been a great gift. I have been able to see them grow on a daily basis in a way that I would never have experienced otherwise. I have only the COVID-19 pandemic to thank for that.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
If you're a Facebook user and have been for a while, every so often they pop up an old post for you to review and reshare if you'd like. They're called Facebook Memories. Here's what popped up on my screen on New Year's Day. A little bit overly optimistic given what this last year was. Yes, indeed, so many opportunities ahead. Of course, in retrospect, I had absolutely no idea how right I was. As we begin a new year, or whatever arbitrary placeholder we choose to bifurcate time into before and after, we have no idea what raw ingredients we're going to be presented with in the time before us. We don't know what ingredients we'll be presented with in 2021 any more than we did a year ago. This past Wednesday night, as I sat in disbelief, alternating between the outrageous scenes out of Washington and the various reactions to what was happening on social media, I was struck by the question that Facebook asks at the top of your feed as an invitation to post something. Facebook asks, "What's on your mind?" And I responded, "Wow, got about 4 years?" Everything that I feared that awful night, a bit more than 4 years ago, when I went to bed with an all-consuming, burning hole of dread in the pit of my stomach. It all came to a head today. This was on Wednesday. The President of the United States, having denied his election defeat, having challenged the defeat in over 60 court cases from local to state to district to circuit to Supreme Court levels, and having all challenges dismissed, incited a band of lawless hoodlums to come to Washington and, in a speech filled with debunked allegations of fraud and incendiary rhetoric, told them to march on the Capitol. And they did. There's nobody in charge of our government tonight. The President is consumed in his grievances and self-obsession. The Vice President, occupied with what should have been a ceremonial ritual long since adjourned, is the one person who could quickly bring this to an end, but probably lacks the integrity to do so. The morning after the 2016 election, after 2 or 3 hours of intermittent sleep, Sandy and I were awakened by the doorbell ringing. The newspaper carrier wanted to make sure we saw the headline, "It's Trump." And over coffee, as we got ready to head for the airport for our flight to Tampa, I contemplated what this would mean. The soul-crushing experience of passing a huge Confederate flag flying high over Interstate 75 in Florida 2 days later is a sight I'll never forget. I can't say I'd predicted the events of today that morning, but the reality that we were in for 4 years of awful was not lost on me. Today validated the horror that I felt that day. We need this to be over. Reverend Tony had asked that I share that this morning. It's ironic that just over a week ago we were celebrating the end of 2020 and the beginning of a new year with the hope that the flipping of the digit, the dropping of the ball, the popping of a cork would bring about something better. A meme circulating widely on social media over the last few days says, "I'd like to cancel my subscription to 2021. I just ended my 7-day trial and I'm not interested." Unfortunately, we don't get that option. We're going to have to take this pile of lemons and make something of it. We have a madman in the White House, and barring some sort of unlikely meeting of the minds in Congress or the Vice President deciding that the well-being of the country somehow figures into his political calculus, we'll have to keep our fingers crossed for the next 10 days in the hopes that whatever remains of the administration around him can keep his worst impulses in check. Our country is divided. 70 million of our neighbors voted to keep this man who just attempted a coup in front of us all in power for another 4 years. An undercurrent of angry, violent, and disaffected people steeped in the lies that he has stoked, filled with fear and animus, are willing to stop at nothing to achieve their ends. We're faced with a raging pandemic that is infecting hundreds of thousands every day with no signs of slowing. Hospitals are turning away the most sick for lack of capacity, and frontline healthcare providers are exhausted to the breaking point. All the while, this administration is paralyzed by a president focused only on staving off his inevitable demise, with no coordination for the distribution and administration of the vaccine that can bring an end to this scourge. We have friends and neighbors across the country and in our own area, in our own communities, who have been out of work for months. Many are homeless, hungry, frightened. Food lines stretch for blocks. Talk about a pile of lemons. And yet, there's hope. In 10 days, a new administration run by sane, compassionate adults will take charge. Plans for a national plan to combat the pandemic are being developed. Some, not all, but many of those who had been pulled into the toxicity of the cult of Trump have been awakened by the events of this past week. On Tuesday, the citizens of Georgia, led by Stacey Abrams and a determined coalition of largely black voters, elected 2 new senators that will allow the new administration to bring legislation to the floor and actually begin to undo the unspeakable damage of the last 4 years. There is hope. It's not magic, but there is hope. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of imagination. But we've got imagination.
I was overwhelmed with anxiety in the beginning of the pandemic, and now I'm able to step back and think of all the opportunities it has made available to me. The power of Zoom has provided a vehicle to spend an hour every Sunday morning to sit with family in Israel and Washington, D.C., and sometimes others as well. As worship chair as Moose, I originally had no idea what we would do to support the needs of our members and friends. I'm amazed at how together with the gifted and talented people in Meriden, we create meaningful services each Sunday morning. I especially appreciate working with Jeff May, who has shared his love of learning new skills and unlimited patience. I'm still anxious about the pandemic, but I'm careful, happy, well, and filled with hope for a better future for us all. Thank you.
I'm guessing you've learned some things this year. I know I have. I think we all have. Whether it's learning how to use social media to connect with loved ones near and far, closer connections and attentions to things in life that used to pass us by, the development of talents we never knew we had, the joy of sitting still, of walking, of stopping to be in the moment. I didn't know what I was going to do that Sunday in March that seems so long ago now. I've been leading worship for over 30 years, but I'd never live streamed a worship service before, and I had no idea of how I was going to do it. With 2 days' notice, I researched the software required, figured out the basics of how it worked, set up my laptop, a couple of cameras, picked up the old Edith Howbring Memorial Chalice from the meeting house, modified the order of service to fit as best I could, enlisted the help of Sandy, John Sepples, Reverend Tony, found sources of music we could use online, set everything up right here in this living room, and at 10:30 that morning, we went online. With the exception of a couple of weeks where storms and internet outages kept us off the air, we've been here every Sunday. Our services keep getting more imaginative and involve more people. We've created a virtual choir, and we're talking about how we continue our online presence even after we're able to return to worship in person. Many of you have used your imagination as part of this. We have a great deal of work ahead of us. There's no shortage of lemons. The question is how we can harness the power of imagination to transform this adversity we face. One of the biggest challenges ahead of us is confronting the toxicity of hatred, anger, fear, and as Reverend Tony pointed out, ignorance that is poisoning our society. How do we confront the structures of racism that lie at the roots of this dysfunction? We need to use our imaginations. The time is now.
There is a time that we must rise.
There is a time that we must stand. There is a time that we must come together. For blessed are our lives. Blessed our love. And blessed the promise gathered now.
let us pause to remember in this moment all of those who live in pain this day. I especially call to mind my cousin Mary, who is in quarantine at home with her son Aiden, who is recovering from COVID-19, and all of those who are infected with this virus. We call into our presence Dawn Dell, who's having spinal surgery related to her MS on February 3rd, and Connie Welton as she continues to heal. Spirit of life and love, we are frightened. The world seems upside down right now. So many are suffering. Angry people under the spell of hatred and fear are causing great harm to the very fabric of our communities, placing our society at risk. Help us bring light to the dark corners. Guide us as we seek to lift the shadows that surround us. Guide us in love. Help us use the power of our imagination to bring peace. As our service draws to a close, we invite you to join us for coffee. Join us for our coffee hour in Zoom. The address to the Zoom room is there on your screen. It's go.uucentralct.org/coffee. That's go.uucentralct.org/coffee. We'll see you there immediately following the service. And the Moose congregation is going to have a discussion of the statement of conscience that is being proposed by the UUA this year. And that will follow the coffee hour in Zoom room. The details are there on your screen. My friends, we come to the end of our time together this morning, and we extinguish our chalice flame. But we extend its light out to all of the world, for light, like love, is pure energy, and it travels wherever we take it. We take it with us. Go in peace, go in love, and may you live in blessing.
Thank